Hey there. So let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to tell a story in English and watched people's eyes glaze over? Maybe you were recounting an exciting experience, something genuinely interesting that happened to you. But as you told it, you could see people losing interest. They weren't engaged. They looked bored. And you thought to yourself, this story is actually really good. Why isn't it landing? Or maybe the opposite happened. You started telling a story and people leaned in, laughed at the right moments, asked questions, wanted to hear more, and you wondered, what did I do right? The difference between a story that captivates and one that falls flat often isn't the content, it's the telling. Storytelling is a skill, not just a matter of recounting events. And in a second language, that skill becomes even more challenging because you're managing both the story structure and the language simultaneously.
Oh, Emily, storytelling in English was one of my biggest frustrations when learning the language, because I'm actually a decent storyteller in my native language. I know how to build suspense, when to pause for effect, how to make people laugh, but when I tried to tell the same stories in English, they just didn't work. I'd forget the punchline in the middle of telling the story because I was thinking about verb tenses, or I'd include every single detail because I didn't know which ones mattered and which didn't. Or I'd tell things in the wrong order because I was translating directly from how I tell it in my language. My stories became these long, confusing rambles with no clear point. People would smile politely, but you could tell they were just waiting for me to finish. It was so discouraging because I knew I could tell good stories, just not in English.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Storytelling is central to human communication. We tell stories constantly. We tell stories about our weekends, our childhoods, things that happened at work, encounters we had, problems we solved. Stories are how we share experiences, teach lessons, entertain, persuade, and connect. If you can't tell stories effectively in English, you're missing out on one of the most powerful communication tools.
Plus, storytelling skills transfer to many contexts. Job interviews often ask for stories about challenges you've overcome. Presentations are more engaging when they include stories. Social conversations rely heavily on anecdotes. Professional networking involves sharing your story. This isn't just about entertaining friends. It's about communicating effectively in all areas of life.
Welcome to English Club Podcast. I'm Emily, and I'm here with my friend Paul, and we're so glad you're here with us. This is our space where we develop real, practical English communication skills.
Today, we're diving into storytelling in English at the B1 level. We're going to learn the structure of effective stories and how to organize your narrative. We're going to explore techniques for making stories engaging, how to build tension, create interest, and keep listeners hooked. We're going to practice using the right verb tenses for storytelling. We're going to learn descriptive language that brings stories to life. And we're going to discuss common mistakes that make stories boring and how to avoid them.
This episode is intensely practical. We're giving you a framework you can apply immediately to any story. You tell, you'll understand not just what makes good stories good, but how to construct them yourself.
This topic matters because storytelling is everywhere in English communication, from casual conversations to professional presentations, from written narratives to spoken anecdotes. The ability to tell a compelling story is invaluable.
Plus, storytelling at the B1 level doesn't require complex grammar or advanced vocabulary. What it requires is structure, selection, pacing, and engagement techniques. These are all learnable skills.
By the end of this episode, you'll know the basic structure of narrative stories. You'll have techniques for making your stories engaging. You'll understand which details to include and which to omit. You'll know how to use your voice, pacing, and language to create interest. And you'll feel much more confident telling stories in English.
And hey, before we dive in, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe to our channel for more English learning podcasts. It really helps us create more content for you. Your support means everything.
Okay, so let's start with the fundamental structure of stories, because all effective stories, whether they're 5 minutes or 5 hours long, follow similar structural patterns.
The most basic story structure has 3 parts: beginning, middle, and end, or as it's sometimes called, setup, confrontation, resolution.
The beginning or setup introduces the situation. Who is the story about? Where and when does it take place? What's the normal situation before things change?
The middle or confrontation is where something happens that disrupts the normal situation. A problem arises, a challenge appears, something unexpected occurs. This is the main action of your story.
The end or resolution is how the situation concludes. How is the problem solved or not solved? What happened in the end? What did you learn, or how did things change?
Let me give you a simple example. Last week, setup. I went to the store to buy milk. Setup. When I got there, they were completely sold out of milk, confrontation. So I had to go to 3 different stores before I finally found milk, confrontation. Eventually, I got home 2 hours later than planned, resolution. But at least I had milk for my morning coffee, resolution.
That's a very simple story, but it has all 3 elements. Setup, going to store, confrontation, no milk, had to search, resolution, finally found it.
Now let's make the structure more sophisticated. Many effective stories use a 5-part structure.
Part 1, opening or hook. This grabs attention immediately. You won't believe what happened to me yesterday. Or I have to tell you the craziest story. Or starting right in the action. So there I was, stuck in an elevator with my boss.
Part 2, background or context. After the hook, you provide necessary information. I was running late for an important meeting. Or I've been terrified of elevators since childhood.
Part 3, rising action or buildup. This is where tension increases, complications develop, the situation escalates. First the lights went out, then we heard this strange grinding noise. My boss started to panic.
Part 4, climax or turning point. This is the most intense or important moment where everything comes to a head. Suddenly, the elevator dropped about 3 feet and stopped. With the jolt.
Part 5, resolution and reflection. How did it end? What did it mean? What's the takeaway? After 40 minutes, they got us out. And you know what? My boss and I actually bonded over the experience. We still laugh about it.
This 5-part structure creates a journey for your listeners. You grab their attention, give them context, build tension, reach a peak moment, then bring them to a satisfying conclusion.
Now let's discuss the importance of having a point. Every story should have a reason for being told.
The point might be to make people laugh. It might be to illustrate something you learned. It might be to explain why you feel a certain way. It might be to share an amazing experience. But there should be a, why am I telling you this?
Stories without clear points feel aimless. The listener keeps waiting to understand why you're telling them this, and if the reason never becomes clear, they feel their time was wasted.
Before telling a story, ask yourself, what's the point of this story? Why am I telling it? If you can't answer that clearly, you might not be ready to tell the story yet.
Common story purposes: to entertain, to teach a lesson, to explain why you believe something, to illustrate a point in a conversation, to share an important experience, to create connection through vulnerability or humor.
Now let's talk about selection, choosing what to include and what to leave out. This is crucial for B1 speakers because you can't describe everything in perfect detail.
Include details that advance the story, create atmosphere, or contribute to the point. Exclude details that don't matter to the story's purpose.
Bad storytelling includes every detail. So I woke up at 7:15, no wait, it was 7:17, and I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth with my blue toothbrush, the one I bought at the store last month, or maybe it was 2 months ago. Then I made coffee, but first I had to grind the beans.
That's exhausting. Those details don't matter unless they're relevant to what happens in the story.
Good storytelling selects relevant details. So I was running late that morning. I rushed through my routine and headed out the door, forgetting to grab my phone. Now the forgotten phone might be important to the story, so we mention it. The toothbrush color? Not important.
Ask yourself, does this detail matter to what happens or to the point I'm making? If I removed it, would the story still make sense? If yes, consider removing it.
Now let's talk about verb tenses in storytelling, because this trips up many B1 learners.
The most common storytelling tense is past simple. I went to the store. I saw my friend. We talked for a while. This is the backbone of most stories.
Past continuous describes ongoing actions or sets the scene. I was walking down the street when I saw my friend. He was carrying a huge box. The continuous tense creates the background against which events happen.
Past perfect is used for events that happened before the main story timeline. I had forgotten my wallet at home, so when I tried to pay, I couldn't. The forgetting happened before the attempted payment.
For vivid storytelling, some speakers use present simple, called the historical present. So I'm walking down the street, right? And I see this huge dog running toward me. This makes stories feel immediate and exciting.
But at B1 level, if present tense confuses you, stick with past simple and past continuous. That's perfectly fine and won't make your stories less engaging.
Example combining tenses. Yesterday, I was walking home. Past continuous, scene setting. When I saw, past simple, event, a car accident. 2 cars had collided. Past perfect, prior event, at the intersection. People were running, past continuous, ongoing action, to help. I called, past simple, event, 911 immediately.
Notice how different tenses serve different purposes. This variety creates texture in your narrative.
Now let's learn transitional phrases that move stories forward smoothly.
Starting, so, Well, okay, so this happened last week. Let me tell you about. You know what happened to me?
Sequencing. First, then, after that, next, later, eventually, finally, in the end.
Adding drama. Suddenly, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, before I knew it, without warning.
Explaining meanwhile, at the same time, while this was happening.
Contrasting. But, however, on the other hand, instead, surprisingly.
Building to climax. And then, so, that's when, at that moment, right then.
Now let's discuss pacing. How fast or slow you tell different parts of the story.
Slow down for important moments. Give details, describe feelings, create suspense. I slowly opened the door. My heart was pounding. I could hear strange noises coming from inside. I took a deep breath and stepped through.
Speed up for less important parts or to create urgency. I rushed through the morning routine, grabbed my keys, and ran out the door.
Use longer sentences with more descriptive language for slow sections. Use shorter, punchier sentences for fast sections or climactic moments.
Example of pacing variation. I had been waiting for this moment for months. Slow, build context. I'd prepared everything carefully, rehearsed what I'd say, imagined every possible scenario. Slow, building anticipation. And then, there she was. Faster, moment of action. I walked up. She turned around. Our eyes met. Very short sentences at climax. And I completely froze. Beat. Everything I'd planned to say just disappeared from my brain. Slower again, reflecting on the moment.
Notice how the sentence length and detail level vary to create rhythm and emphasis.
Now let's explore using dialogue in stories. Dialogue brings stories to life.
Instead of, he told me he was sorry, say, he looked at me and said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Direct quotes are more engaging than reported speech.
You don't need to quote entire conversations word for word. Select the most important or interesting things that were said.
Use different voices or tones when quoting different people. This helps listeners follow who's speaking and makes the story more dynamic.
Dialogue also breaks up narration. Too much description gets monotonous. Conversation creates variety.
Example, so I was telling my boss about the problem, and he just looked at me and said, this is unacceptable. And I'm thinking, I know it's unacceptable. That's why I'm telling you. But I just said, I understand. I'm working on a solution.
Notice how the dialogue reveals personality, creates conflict, and moves the story forward more.
Efficiently than just describing what happened. Now, let's discuss using descriptive language to make stories vivid without using complex vocabulary.
You don't need fancy words. You need specific, concrete details. Instead of the room was messy, say there were clothes all over the floor, dishes piled in the sink, and paper scattered across every surface.
Instead of it was scary, describe what made it scary. My hands were shaking. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Every shadow looked like someone hiding.
Instead of she was angry, show it. She crossed her arms, her face turned red, and she said very slowly and quietly, "Get out."
Engage multiple senses when appropriate. What did you see, hear, smell, feel physically, taste? The coffee was terrible, bitter, and lukewarm. The cafe smelled like old grease, and my chair wobbled every time I moved.
Use comparisons and metaphors when they fit naturally. It was like trying to swim through peanut butter. Paints a clearer picture than it was very difficult to move.
Now, let's discuss emotional engagement, making your audience care about what happens.
Share how you felt. Don't just report events. I was absolutely terrified, or I felt this huge sense of relief, or I was so angry I couldn't speak. Makes the story emotionally resonant.
Create empathy by describing relatable feelings or situations. Everyone has felt embarrassed, scared, excited, disappointed. When you describe these universal emotions, listeners connect.
Build stakes. Help the audience understand why the outcome mattered. This was my last chance to make a good impression, or I'd been saving for this trip for 2 years, makes listeners invested.
Show vulnerability when appropriate. Stories where everything goes perfectly for you aren't as interesting as stories where you struggle, make mistakes, or face challenges.
Now let's learn about using humor in stories.
Humor often comes from unexpected twists, irony, or self-deprecation. I'd prepared this whole elaborate surprise party, but when I got there, it turned out I had the wrong date. I'd arrived a day early.
Exaggeration can be funny. I must have checked my phone 1,000 times, or it felt like it took forever, probably 10 full minutes.
Physical comedy works in stories. Describing yourself or others doing something clumsy or awkward often gets laughs.
Callbacks are when you reference something from earlier in the story. And remember that guy from the beginning who told me it would be easy? Yeah, I'm never listening to him again.
Don't laugh at your own jokes too much or explain them. If something's funny, let the audience discover it. Trust your listeners.
Now let's discuss common mistakes B1 storytellers make.
Mistake 1, including too many unnecessary details. So I was wearing my blue shirt. No, wait, it was green. No, it was definitely blue. Anyway, I was wearing this shirt. Unless the shirt color matters, skip it.
Mistake 2, losing track of the point. You start telling one story, get distracted by a tangent, start telling a different story, and never finish either one.
Mistake 3, telling events out of order in a confusing way. So then he said he was sorry, but before that, I'd already told him I was angry. Actually, let me back up. Earlier that day, jumping around in time confuses.
Seize listeners. Mistake 4, no clear ending. The story just peters out without resolution. And then, yeah, so that's basically what happened. I mean, there was more, but anyway.
Mistake 5, explaining everything rather than showing. It was really funny, instead of telling the funny part and letting people laugh.
Mistake 6, speaking in monotone with no variation in speed, volume, or energy. This makes even exciting stories feel boring.
Now let's learn different types of stories and their specific characteristics.
Funny stories or anecdotes focus on humor. The point is to make people laugh. Set up expectations, then subvert them. I thought I was impressing this girl by speaking French to her. Turns out she was actually Spanish and didn't speak any French. I'd been making no sense for 10 minutes.
Dramatic or suspenseful stories build tension. Use pacing, descriptive details, and emotional language. I could hear footsteps behind me. I walked faster. The footsteps got faster too.
Lesson or moral stories illustrate something you learned. Make the lesson clear, but not heavy-handed. I learned that day that asking for help isn't weakness, it's actually courage.
Shared experience stories create connection by describing relatable situations. We've all had that moment where you're talking to someone and realize you have no idea who they are, but it's too late to ask.
Achievement or success stories describe overcoming challenges. These work well in professional contexts. When I first started, I could barely introduce myself in English, but I practiced every day, and now I'm conducting meetings entirely in English.
Now let's practice analyzing what makes a story good. I'll tell a short story poorly, then tell the same story well. Let's identify the differences.
Okay, let me hear it.
Poor version. So I went to the store yesterday. It was Tuesday, I think, or maybe Wednesday. Anyway, I went to get milk. The store is about 10 minutes from my house. I drove there in my car. When I got there, I went to the dairy section. They didn't have the milk I usually buy, so I got a different kind. Then I paid and left. The cashier was nice. Her name was Sarah, I think. Or maybe it was Sarah without an H. I can't remember. Anyway, I got home and realized I bought the wrong kind of milk. My husband doesn't like that kind. So I had to go back. I got a refund and bought the right kind. Then I went home again.
Okay, now the good version?
Good version. Yesterday was one of those days where simple tasks become comedy. I went to the store for milk. One item. Easy, right? Wrong. My usual brand was sold out, so I grabbed an alternative without really looking at it. I got home, my husband looked in the bag and said, "Emily, this is lactose-free milk." I said, "So?" He said, "Neither of us is lactose intolerant." I'd bought the most expensive milk in the store for absolutely no reason. So back to the store I went. The same cashier saw me coming and started laughing before I even got to our register. She remembered me from 20 minutes earlier. I sheepishly explained and she said, "Happens all the time. But you know what? I'm pretty sure it doesn't."
Wow, what a difference. The first version included irrelevant details like what day it was, how far the store is, the cashier's name. It had no point, no humor, no emotional element.
But the second version cut unnecessary details, focused on what mattered, buying the wrong milk, included dialogue that revealed character, had a funny punchline, and had a clear point. I made a silly mistake.
The second version also had better pacing and built to the revelation of the mistake rather than just stating it flatly.
Now let's discuss strategies for remembering and organizing your thoughts while telling stories in English.
Before telling a story, mentally outline the key points: beginning, main event, resolution. This framework keeps you on track.
If you lose your place, it's okay to pause briefly and say, "Let me think. Where was I?" Or, Sorry, I'm trying to remember what happened next.
Don't worry too much about perfect grammar while telling stories orally. Natural flow and engagement matter more than perfect sentences. You can self-correct major errors, but don't stop constantly to fix every little mistake.
Practice telling the same story multiple times. The first telling might be rough, but each retelling becomes smoother as you figure out which parts work and which don't.
Record yourself telling stories, just audio on your phone. Listen back and notice where you got confused, where you rambled, where the story dragged. This helps you improve.
Now let's learn how to open stories in ways that grab attention.
Start with a question. Have you ever had one of those days where absolutely everything goes wrong?
Start with a dramatic statement. I almost died last week. Or, I met the most interesting person yesterday.
Start in the middle of action. So there I was, standing in the middle of Times Square in my pajamas.
Start with the ending, then flashback. That's how I ended up spending the night in a police station. Let me back up and explain.
Connect to the current conversation. That reminds me of something that happened to me. Or, speaking of terrible bosses, let me tell you about my first job.
Now let's discuss how to end stories effectively.
Circle back to the beginning. If you opened with a question or statement, reference it at the end. So that's how I ended up in my pajamas in Times Square. And that's why I always double-check what I'm wearing before leaving the house now.
State the lesson or takeaway explicitly if it's a teaching story. I learned that day that...
For funny stories, end with the punchline and let people laugh. Don't keep talking immediately after.
For dramatic stories, end with the resolution and maybe a brief reflection. We got out safely, thank goodness, but I've never looked at elevators the same way since.
Use a callback to something earlier in the story for a satisfying conclusion. And that's why, to this day, I can't eat sushi without thinking about that disastrous first date.
Now let's practice complete storytelling. I'll tell a full story using the techniques we've discussed, and Paul will point out the techniques.
Okay, I'm ready.
You know that saying, what could possibly go wrong? Never say that, ever. Hook with humor. Last month, I volunteered to organize my friend's surprise birthday party. Setup. I'd never planned a party before, but I thought, how hard could it be? Foreshadowing trouble. I booked a room at a restaurant, invited 30 people, ordered a cake, and coordinated everyone to arrive early. Everything seemed perfect. Rising action with a false sense of security. The day of the party, I arrived an hour early to decorate. Specific detail. I walked into the restaurant and asked for our reserved room. The manager looked confused. We don't have any reservation under that name, she said. Dialogue reveals problem. My stomach dropped, showing emotion. I pulled up my confirmation email. Specific action. See, I showed her. 2 weeks ago, 30 people, tonight at 7 p.m. She read it carefully, and her face went pale. Ma'am, she said quietly, this is for next month. You booked it for December 15th. Today is November 15th. Dialogue delivers climax. I had planned the perfect surprise party for the wrong date, restating the problem for emphasis. 30 people were showing up in 1 hour, and I had no venue. Stakes. I did what any rational person would do. I started calling every restaurant in the neighborhood. Resolution begins. No one had space for 30 people on such short notice. Finally, on my 8th call, a pizza place said they could squeeze us in. Problem solving. So my friend's elegant surprise dinner party became a surprise pizza party with paper plates in a noisy, crowded pizzeria. Contrast between plan and reality. When she arrived and everyone yelled surprise, she looked around at the pizza place, looked at me, and burst out laughing. This is so perfectly chaotic, she said. I love it. Resolution through dialogue. It actually ended up being more fun than the fancy dinner would have been. Silver lining. But I have never and will never volunteer to party again. Ending with humor and callback to opening.
That was excellent. You used so many techniques. The hook warned us something would go wrong. You built tension by making everything seem perfect before revealing the mistake. You used dialogue to reveal the problem dramatically. You showed your emotions. You included specific details like the date confusion. The pacing varied, slower description at the beginning, faster action when solving the problem. And the ending circled back to the opening idea of things going wrong. Really well done.
Thank you. And notice that I didn't use complex grammar or advanced vocabulary. The story worked because of structure, selection, pacing, and engagement techniques, not complicated language.
Now let's discuss telling stories in writing versus speaking.
Written stories can be longer and more detailed because readers can go at their own pace. Spoken stories need to be more concise because listeners can't stop and reread.
Written stories rely entirely on words.
Spoken stories use voice, gestures, facial expressions, and pacing to create meaning.
In written stories, you need to be more careful about clarity because the reader can't ask questions. In spoken stories, you can read your audience and adjust if they seem confused.
Written stories should be more polished and edited. Spoken stories can be more spontaneous and imperfect. That's actually part of their charm.
But many of the same principles apply to both. Have a clear structure, include relevant details, build to a climax, and have a satisfying resolution. Now let's discuss cultural differences in storytelling. Some cultures value direct, concise stories that get to the point quickly. Others appreciate longer, more elaborate narratives with many details. Some cultures expect stories to have explicit morals or others prefer lessons that listeners discover themselves. The amount of emotion in storytelling varies by culture. Some cultures appreciate dramatic, emotional expression. Others prefer more reserved, understated narration.
Understanding the storytelling norms of your audience helps you adjust your style appropriately.
As we approach the end of this episode, let me give you practical exercises for improving your storytelling.
First, practice telling a simple story about something that happened to you this week. Focus on structure, beginning, middle, end. Tell it to yourself out loud as practice.
Second, listen to storytellers, podcasts, TED Talks, friends who tell good stories. Notice what they do. How do they structure stories? When do they speed up or slow down? What details do they include?
Third, write out a story you want to tell. Outline the key events, then write it fully. Reading it back helps you see where you've included too much or too little detail.
Fourth, tell the same story to different people and notice what works. Do people laugh where you expected? Do they seem confused at any point? Learn from each telling.
Fifth, record yourself telling a story. Listen back without judgment, as if you're listening to someone else. What parts are engaging? Where does it drag?
Sixth, practice different types of stories. Funny, dramatic, lesson-oriented. Different types require different techniques, and variety builds your overall skill.
I'd love to hear from you. What's a story you'd like to be able to tell well in English? What makes storytelling challenging for you? Share in the comments.
And please, if you found this episode helpful, like and subscribe to English Club for more English learning podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.
Remember, storytelling is a skill that improves with practice. Your first attempts might feel awkward, but each story you tell builds your confidence and ability.
Don't wait until you're good enough to tell stories. Start now. Tell stories even when they're imperfect. That's how you get better.
Your B1 English is absolutely sufficient for good storytelling. What matters is structure, engagement, pacing, and selection, not fancy vocabulary or complex grammar.
People connect with authentic, engaging stories more than they connect with grammatically perfect but boring narration. Prioritize connection over perfection.
And remember, everyone has stories worth telling. Your experiences, perspectives, and observations are interesting. You just need the skills to share them effectively.
You now have those skills. You know how to structure stories. You know techniques for making them engaging. You understand pacing, selection, and how to use dialogue and description.
See you in the next episode. Keep practicing your English, and remember, you're doing great.
And the next time you have a story to tell, remember, hook them at the beginning, build tension in the middle, deliver a satisfying ending, and trust that your story is worth telling. Because it is. Take care and bye for now.